Everyone thought this luxury crib was a perfect gift, until my husband tried putting our baby in it. My sister Emma and my parents gave me this incredibly expensive crib at my baby shower. "This is perfect for you," Emma smiled, her voice dripping with that familiar sweetness that always made my stomach turn. "It's expensive, so be grateful," my mother laughed, giving me that look that said I better not dare complain. But I never used it. When my husband David asked why, I just smiled and said, "Try putting the baby in." He did, and his face went pale. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't really about a crib. It's about 28 years of being the family scapegoat, and how one generous gift almost cost me everything I held dear. I'm Sarah, and I've been walking on eggshells my entire life. Growing up, my older sister Emma was what psychologists call the golden child. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Me, I was the convenient target for everything that went sideways in our house. Missing money? Sarah must have taken it. Broken vase? Obviously Sarah's fault. Emma getting caught lying? Well, Sarah probably influenced her somehow. The pattern started early. I remember being 7 years old, coming home from school excited to show my mom a drawing I'd made. Emma, who was 10 at the time, had accidentally spilled juice all over her homework and was crying about it. My mum took one look at my happy face and snapped, "Sarah, why can't you be more careful like your sister? Now look what happened to her project because you left your backpack in the way." My backpack hadn't been anywhere near Emma's homework. But that didn't matter. Nothing I said ever mattered. Emma would shoot me this little smirk over Mum's shoulder while getting comforted, and I learned to swallow my words. It was easier than fighting a battle I could never win. The gifts started when I turned 12. And Emma would give me things for my birthday or Christmas. A sweater that had a hole in the back where no one could see it until I wore it to school. A diary with pages that had been carefully steamed open and re-glued. A necklace that left green marks on my neck after a few hours. When I'd mention these problems, my parents would get that disappointed look. "Emma spent her allowance on you, and this is how you show gratitude?" Dad would say, shaking his head. "She has such a generous heart, and you're looking for problems that aren't there." But they were there. They were always there. I just learned to stop pointing them out. By high school, I'd developed what I now recognize as hypervigilance, that constant state of alertness that comes from never knowing when the next emotional ambush is coming. I'd check everything Emma gave me obsessively, but she got smarter too. The problems became more subtle, more plausibly deniable. A birthday cake with salt instead of sugar. The bakery must have made a mistake. A prom dress that split at the seams during photos. These cheap materials these days. Emma had perfected the art of plausible deniability, and my parents had perfected the art of willful blindness. When I moved out for college, I thought I'd finally escaped. But family dysfunction doesn't respect geography. The phone calls continued. The guilt trips multiplied, and every family gathering became an exercise in emotional survival. I learned to grey rock, to become as boring and unresponsive as possible, giving Emma fewer opportunities to create drama. That's when I met David during my junior year. He was studying engineering, steady and logical in a way that felt like coming home after a lifetime of chaos. More importantly, he believed me. When I told him about my family dynamics, he didn't try to minimize it or suggest I was overreacting. He just listened, really listened, and said, "That sounds exhausting. I'm sorry you went through that." Those 6 words, "I'm sorry you went through that," nearly broke me. Nobody in my family had ever acknowledged my pain as valid. David and I got married 2 years after graduation. A small ceremony because every time we tried to plan something bigger, Emma would find ways to insert herself into the decision-making process, until the whole thing became about managing her emotions instead of celebrating our love. My parents thought our intimate wedding was selfish, but David and I were just relieved to start our marriage without family drama for once. For 3 beautiful years, we built a life together. David's family welcomed me with the kind of unconditional warmth I'd only read about in books. His mother never once compared me to anyone else or suggested I wasn't grateful enough. His father told Dad jokes and actually laughed at mine. It was healing in ways I didn't know I needed. Then I got pregnant. The moment we announced it, something shifted in my family's dynamic. Suddenly, Emma was incredibly interested in being involved. She called weekly to check on me, offered to throw the baby shower, insisted on being in the delivery room. My parents were over the moon about becoming grandparents and kept gushing about how wonderful it was that Emma was stepping up to help. But I knew better. I'd seen this movie before. Emma didn't do anything without an agenda, and her sudden interest in my pregnancy felt like a spider spinning a web. I just couldn't figure out what she was planning. The baby shower was Emma's idea, of course. "You shouldn't have to stress about planning while you're pregnant," she said with that syrupy concern that made my skin crawl. "Let me handle everything. It'll be perfect." I wanted to say no, but David encouraged me to let her help. "Maybe this is her way of trying to be a better sister," he suggested. "People can change, especially when babies are involved." David meant well, but he'd grown up in a healthy family where people's motivations were generally straightforward. He couldn't quite grasp the level of psychological complexity that defined my family relationships. In his world, when someone offered help, they actually wanted to help. In mine, every offer came with invisible strings attached, so I agreed to the baby shower, but with conditions. I wanted it small, just close family and a few friends. I wanted it at my house so I could control the environment, and I wanted to approve the guest list and menu. Emma agreed to everything with that same sweet smile, and I should have known right then that something was wrong. The Emma I knew didn't agree to anything without a fight. The day of the shower arrived in early September. I was 7 months pregnant, feeling huge and uncomfortable, but genuinely excited to celebrate with the people I cared about. David had spent the morning helping me set up, arranging chairs in our living room and hanging the simple decorations Emma had brought over. The guests started arriving around 2:00, my college roommate Jessica, my co-worker Monica, my mother-in-law Patricia, and a few other close friends. My parents came with Emma, who was carrying an enormous wrapped box that clearly required 2 people to handle properly. "What on earth is that?" I asked, eyeing the size of the package. "Just a little something for the baby," Emma said, but her eyes were sparkling with that mischievous look I'd learned to fear as a child. "You're going to love it." The shower started pleasantly enough. We played the usual games, everyone cooed over tiny baby clothes, and I felt genuinely grateful for the love and support surrounding me. For a moment I let myself believe that maybe this time would be different. Maybe becoming an aunt would bring out Emma's better angels. Then it was time for presents. Emma insisted her gift go last. "It's the big finale," she announced, and everyone laughed. The box was so large that David had to help her carry it to the center of the room. As I started unwrapping it, I could feel Emma's eyes on me, watching my every reaction. Inside was the most beautiful crib I'd ever seen. Cherry wood with intricate carvings, a matching mobile with hand-sewn animals, and bedding that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. The price tag was still attached, $800. The room erupted in gasps and compliments. "Emma, this is incredible!" Jessica exclaimed. "Sarah, you're so lucky to have such a generous sister." "This is perfect for you," Emma said, and something in her tone made my stomach clench. There was too much satisfaction in her voice, like she'd just played a winning card in a game I didn't know we were playing. My mother beamed. "It's expensive, so be grateful," she said with a laugh, but her eyes held that familiar warning. Don't you dare seem ungrateful. Don't you dare ruin this moment for Emma. I forced a smile and said all the right things. Thank you, it's beautiful, I don't know what to say. But inside, alarm bells were ringing. This was too generous, too perfect, too public for Emma's usual style. She preferred her sabotage subtle and private, where she could maintain plausible deniability. David, standing behind me, squeezed my shoulder. "This is amazing, Emma. Thank you so much." His gratitude was genuine. He saw a generous gift from his sister-in-law and took it at face value. He didn't see the calculating gleam in Emma's eyes, or notice how she kept glancing at me to gauge my reaction. The rest of the shower passed in a blur of thank yous and small talk. Emma basked in everyone's praise for her generosity, playing the role of devoted sister to perfection. She helped clean up afterward, chatted with my mother-in-law about baby care tips, and even volunteered to help set up the nursery. "I just want everything to be perfect for my little niece or nephew," she said as she was leaving, giving me a hug that felt more like a territorial marking than genuine affection. After everyone left, David and I sat in our living room, surrounded by baby gifts, the massive crib box dominating the space like a beautiful, expensive question mark. "That was really nice of her," David said, running his hand through his hair. "I know you have a complicated relationship with Emma, but maybe having a baby in the family is changing things." I stared at the box, that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that I'd just been handed a time bomb wrapped in pretty paper. Every generous thing Emma had ever given me had come with a hidden cost, and this felt bigger than a sweater with a hole or a diary with compromised privacy. This was about my baby. Over the next few weeks, the crib box sat in our spare room like an accusation. David would occasionally ask when we were going to set it up, and I'd find excuses to put it off. Too tired, too busy, want to finish painting the nursery first. He started to look concerned about my reluctance, but he didn't push. Emma, however, had no such restraint. "Have you set up the crib yet?" became her standard greeting every time she called. When I'd say not yet, she'd get that edge in her voice that I remembered from childhood. "You know, if you don't want it, I'm sure someone else would appreciate it. I spent a lot of money on that gift." The guilt trips escalated. My mother started calling too. "Emma keeps asking about the crib. She's hurt that you haven't used it yet. After everything she's done for you." But I couldn't do it. Every time I looked at that box, every instinct I'd developed over 28 years of navigating Emma's psychological landmines told me something was wrong. I just couldn't figure out what. Then my due date started approaching, and David's patience with my avoidance finally ran out. "Honey," he said one evening, sitting beside me on the couch with that serious expression that meant we were about to have a conversation. "The baby's coming in 6 weeks. We need to set up the nursery, and that includes the crib. I know you're worried about something, but Emma spent a lot of money on this gift. The least we can do is use it." I looked at my husband's earnest face, this good man who'd never had to develop the survival skills that came from growing up in emotional warfare. How could I explain that generous gifts from my sister felt like poison apples? How could I make him understand that my hypervigilance wasn't paranoia, but a finely tuned instrument for detecting danger? "I know you think I'm being paranoid," I said carefully, "but something feels off about this whole thing. Emma doesn't do generous without an agenda." David sighed. "I get that your family has issues, but maybe this is her trying to do better. Maybe having a baby nephew or niece is making her want to be a better aunt than she was a sister." He wasn't wrong that people could change, but he was wrong about Emma. Emma didn't do better. Emma did different versions of the same manipulation, adapted for new circumstances, but I was 8 months pregnant, exhausted, and running out of reasonable objections. The social pressure was mounting from all sides, and I was starting to feel like the ungrateful sister everyone said I was. "Okay," I said finally, "but let's test it first. Set it up and make sure everything's secure before the baby arrives." David's face lit up with relief. "Of course, that's just good sense anyway." The next weekend we decided to tackle the nursery. David had already painted the walls a soft yellow and assembled the changing table. The crib was the final piece, the centerpiece that would make the room complete. As David started unpacking the crib components, I sat in the rocking chair we'd bought second-hand, watching him work. The pieces were beautiful, solid cherry wood with intricate details that spoke of quality craftsmanship. If I didn't know better, I'd think Emma had chosen the perfect gift. But I did know better. "Everything looks good so far," David said, consulting the instruction manual. "This is really well made. Emma has good taste." I nodded absently, but my attention was focused on studying every piece as David unpacked it. The headboard, footboard, side rails, mattress support, everything looked exactly as it should. Maybe I really was being paranoid. Maybe my hypervigilance was finally leading me astray. It took David about 2 hours to assemble the crib, and I had to admit it looked beautiful in the nursery. The cherry wood glowed in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, and the overall effect was exactly what I'd pictured for our baby's room. "See?" David said, stepping back to admire his work. "It's perfect. Emma really came through." But something still felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on what, but that familiar knot of anxiety hadn't loosened in my chest. If anything, seeing the completed crib made it worse. "I want to test it," I said suddenly. David looked confused. "Test it how?" "Put something in it, a doll or something. I want to make sure it's stable before we put the baby in." David's expression softened with understanding. "Honey, I get that you're nervous about the baby's safety, but this crib meets all current safety standards. See?" He pointed to a sticker on the frame. "It's certified." But the sticker looked old, older than it should for a recently purchased crib. And something about the way it was positioned seemed off, like it had been removed and reapplied. "Please," I said, and something in my voice must have conveyed the urgency I felt. "Just humour me. Put something in it, and let's see how it holds up." David hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let me grab that doll your mum gave us." He left the room and returned with a baby doll that was roughly the size and weight of a newborn. As he approached the crib, I found myself holding my breath, though I couldn't say why. David gently placed the doll in the centre of the crib mattress. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then the doll shifted slightly, the way a real baby might during sleep. That's when it happened. The bottom of the mattress support gave way with a soft clicking sound, like a hidden mechanism activating. The doll dropped through what should have been solid support, falling into a gap that had suddenly opened between the mattress and the crib frame. David's face went pale as he stared at the doll, now trapped in a space that shouldn't exist, a space where a real baby could easily suffocate or be seriously injured. "What the hell?" he whispered, reaching in to pull the doll free. But I was already moving, my phone in my hand, documenting everything. The hidden mechanism, the way the mattress support had been designed to fail, the trap that my sister had gift-wrapped and delivered to my baby shower. This wasn't a defective crib. This was a carefully planned attempt to hurt my child, disguised as the most generous gift Emma had ever given me. And for the first time in my life, I had proof. My hands were shaking as I took photos of the crib from every angle, documenting the hidden mechanism that had just revealed itself. David stood frozen beside me, the baby doll still clutched in his hands, his face a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Sarah," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "this could have killed our baby." The weight of those words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just another one of Emma's petty sabotages, a ruined birthday cake, or a deliberately damaged gift. This was attempted harm against an innocent child who hadn't even been born yet. My child. "I need to research this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "There has to be more to this story." I spent the next 3 hours on my laptop while David carefully dismantled the crib, examining every component. What I found made my blood run cold. The crib model had been recalled 6 months earlier due to exactly the mechanism we'd just discovered. A faulty mattress support that could collapse under a baby's weight, creating a suffocation hazard. 3 babies had already been injured and 1 had died. The recall notice was dated February 15th. Emma had given me the crib in September. She had to have known. But the most damning evidence came when I cross-referenced the serial number on the crib with the manufacturer's database. This specific unit had been reported as returned to the manufacturer for destruction as part of the recall process. Somehow, Emma had gotten her hands on a crib that was supposed to have been destroyed for being deadly. "David," I called him over to see the screen. "Look at this." He read over my shoulder, his face growing paler with each line. "She knew," he said finally. "Emma knew this crib was dangerous when she gave it to you." The rational part of my brain was still struggling to process it. How do you wrap your mind around the fact that your sister deliberately tried to harm your unborn child? How do you accept that level of evil from someone who's supposed to love you? But the part of me that had survived 28 years of Emma's psychological warfare wasn't surprised at all. This was just Emma being Emma, scaled up to match the higher stakes. She'd always been willing to hurt me to get what she wanted. Attention, sympathy, the role of the good daughter. Now she was willing to hurt my baby for the same reasons. I could already picture how it would have played out in Emma's mind. The tragic accident, the defective crib that she'd so generously given me, the family rallying around Emma, the grieving aunt who would blame herself for choosing that particular crib. She'd get sympathy, attention, and the satisfaction of knowing she'd hurt me in the most devastating way possible. The scariest part was how close it had come to working. "We have to tell someone," David said, pacing around our living room. "The police, your parents, somebody." But I knew better. I'd tried telling people about Emma before, and no one ever believed me. She was too good at playing the victim, too skilled at making me look like the paranoid, ungrateful sister who saw malice where none existed. "We need more evidence," I said. "Photos, documentation, something that proves she knew about the recall." Over the next week, I became a woman obsessed. I researched everything I could about the crib recall, tracked down other victims' families, and even called the manufacturer to verify the serial number information. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Emma had deliberately given me a crib she knew was deadly. But I still needed proof that she'd known about the recall. That's when I remembered Emma's social media habits. She was always posting about her charitable activities, her volunteer work, her involvement in various causes. If she'd encountered information about the recall, there might be a digital trail. It took me 2 days of digging through her Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts, but I finally found it. A post from March, just 1 month after the recall was announced, where Emma had shared an article about crib safety with the comment, "So scary. Every parent needs to check if their baby furniture has been recalled. Better safe than sorry. Baby safety, me mom tips." She'd known. She'd known for 6 months, and she'd given me that crib anyway. I screenshot everything and created a detailed timeline. The recall announcement, Emma's social media post acknowledging she knew about baby furniture recalls, the date she'd given me the crib, and all the documentation proving this specific crib should have been destroyed. But even with all this evidence, I knew confronting Emma directly would be useless. She'd deny everything, play the victim, and turn the whole family against me for attacking her. I needed witnesses, people who couldn't be manipulated or gaslit. That's when I decided to call a family meeting. I told my parents and Emma that David and I had some exciting news to share about the baby, and we wanted to gather everyone together. Emma immediately volunteered to host, but I insisted it had to be at our house. I want to show everyone the nursery, I said, which was true, just not in the way they thought. The day of the meeting arrived on a crisp October afternoon. I was 36 weeks pregnant and felt like I was carrying a bowling ball, but adrenaline was keeping me sharp and focused. David had set up our laptop connected to the TV, ready to display all the evidence I'd gathered. My parents arrived first, followed by Emma, who came bearing a homemade casserole and that same sweet smile that had fooled everyone for decades. "I'm so excited to see what you wanted to show us," she said, giving me a hug that felt like a snake coiling around its prey. "Is it baby pictures? Have you taken maternity photos yet?" "Something like that," I said, leading everyone into the living room. We made small talk for a few minutes, my parents asking about my doctor's appointments and due date, Emma offering unsolicited advice about labour and delivery. The whole time I could feel David's nervous energy beside me. He kept glancing at the laptop, ready to play the evidence that would finally expose Emma's true nature. "So," my mother said eventually, "what's this exciting news you wanted to share?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward for weeks, maybe years. The moment I finally had proof that couldn't be denied or gaslit away. Actually, before we get to that, I wanted to thank Emma for the beautiful crib she gave us at the baby shower. It really is stunning. Emma's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Oh, you're so welcome. I'm just so glad you finally set it up. I was starting to worry you didn't like it." "Oh, we definitely learned some interesting things when we set it up," I said, reaching for the laptop. "In fact, I thought you might want to see what we discovered." I opened the first photo, the crib with the collapsed mattress support, the baby doll trapped in the gap that shouldn't exist. Emma's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "What happened there? Did you set it up wrong?" "No," David said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is how the crib is designed to function, or rather, malfunction." I clicked to the next slide, the recall notice with the highlighted date and description of the exact problem we'd encountered. The room went dead silent. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Emma's face had gone completely white. "This crib model was recalled 6 months ago," I said, my voice steady and clear. 3 babies were injured. 1 died. Every unit was supposed to be returned to the manufacturer for destruction. "That's impossible," Emma whispered. "I bought that crib new. The salesperson said it was perfectly safe." But I was already clicking to the next slide, the manufacturer's database showing our crib's serial number as returned and destroyed. "This specific crib was reported as destroyed in April," I said. "Yet somehow it ended up wrapped with a bow at my baby shower in September." My father was staring at Emma now, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "Emma, where exactly did you buy this crib?" Emma's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I could see her mind racing, trying to come up with an explanation that would make her look innocent. But I wasn't done. I clicked to the final slide, her own Facebook post about checking for recalled baby furniture. "And here's Emma's post from March," I said, reading it aloud. "So scary. Every parent needs to check if their baby furniture has been recalled. Better safe than sorry." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma was trapped, caught in a web of her own making, with no plausible deniability left. "Sarah," my mother said slowly, What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," I replied. "I'm stating facts. Emma gave me a crib she knew was recalled and dangerous, a crib that could have killed my baby." Emma finally found her voice, but it came out as a strangled sob. It was an accident. I must have gotten confused about which crib I bought." But David was ready for that. "The sales receipt, Emma. Where's the sales receipt for an $800 crib?" Emma's face crumpled. I lost it." "Convenient," I said. "Because, according to the manufacturer, this crib was never sold to the public after the recall. It was supposed to be destroyed." My father was looking at Emma like he'd never seen her before. "Emma, how did you get this crib?" And that's when Emma's mask finally slipped completely. The sweet, generous sister disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Fine," she snapped, her voice sharp with venom. "You want the truth? I found it at a garage sale, okay? Someone was selling it cheap, and I thought it would be perfect for Sarah's precious baby." "You bought a recalled crib at a garage sale," my mother said slowly, "and gave it to your pregnant sister without checking if it was safe?" "It was just supposed to be a scare," Emma burst out, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't think she'd actually use it. Sarah never uses anything I give her anyway. She always finds something wrong with everything." The room erupted. My mother gasped, my father started shouting, and David jumped to his feet, his face dark with rage. "A scare?" David's voice was deadly quiet. "You thought it would be funny to scare a pregnant woman with a death trap?" "You don't understand," Emma was sobbing now, all pretense gone. "She gets everything. Perfect husband, perfect marriage, perfect life, and now a perfect baby. What about me? What do I get?" "You get the satisfaction of knowing you almost killed an innocent child," I said, standing up as best I could with my enormous belly. "You get to live with the fact that you're the kind of person who would hurt a baby to get attention." My mother was staring at Emma like she'd never seen her before. "Emma, this is psychotic. You could have killed Sarah's baby." "But I didn't," Emma screamed. "Nothing happened. She's fine. The baby's fine. Everyone's fine." "No thanks to you," my father said, his voice heavy with disgust. "Emma, I don't know who you are anymore." But I did. I'd always known who Emma was. The only difference was that now everyone else could see it too. "I want you out of my house," I said quietly, "and I want you out of my life." Emma's face twisted with rage. "You can't cut me off. I'm your sister." "No," I said, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. "A sister wouldn't try to hurt my child. A sister wouldn't spend decades making my life miserable for her own entertainment. You're not my sister anymore, Emma. You're just someone I used to know." The aftermath was swift and decisive. My parents, shocked into finally seeing Emma's true nature, didn't try to defend her or ask me to forgive her. They apologized profusely, admitting they'd enabled Emma's behavior for years by refusing to see it. Emma was escorted out of our house and our lives. She tried calling, texting, showing up at our door, but we'd installed security cameras and changed our locks. David handled all communication with a cease and desist letter from our lawyer. 3 weeks later, our daughter was born, healthy, perfect, and safe in a new crib we'd bought ourselves from a reputable store. We named her Hope because that's what she represented to us. Hope for a future free from toxic family dynamics. Hope for breaking generational cycles of manipulation and abuse. Emma tried one last time to insert herself into our lives, showing up at the hospital claiming she wanted to meet her niece. The security guards escorted her out, and I never saw her again. My parents, deeply ashamed of how they'd enabled Emma for so many years, worked hard to rebuild their relationship with us. It wasn't easy, and it took time, but they genuinely seemed to understand the damage that had been done. They were wonderful grandparents to Hope, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a real family, 6 months after Hope was born, David and I were sitting in our living room, watching our daughter sleep peacefully in her safe, properly functioning crib. The nursery was exactly what I'd always dreamed of: warm, welcoming, and free from the shadow of Emma's malice. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked quietly. "Cutting off Emma completely?" I thought about it for a moment, watching Hope's tiny chest rise and fall in the gentle rhythm of infant sleep. "No," I said finally. "I spent 28 years trying to have a relationship with someone who saw me as an enemy to be defeated rather than a sister to be loved. I won't spend another day of my life, or let Hope spend even one day of hers, in that kind of toxic environment." David nodded, reaching over to take my hand. "She's safe now. That's what matters." And she was. Hope was safe, I was free, and for the first time in my life, I was surrounded only by people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts about that crib. If I'd let social pressure override my intuition and put Hope in that death trap disguised as a gift. The thought still makes me nauseous. But more often, I think about the lesson in all of this. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone gaslight you into ignoring your own instincts, especially when it comes to protecting the people you love. Emma taught me that not everyone who shares your DNA has your best interests at heart. But Hope taught me something even more important, that you can break cycles of toxicity and build the kind of family you wish you'd had growing up. Have you ever felt like someone in your family was more interested in hurting you than loving you? Have you ever received a gift that felt more like a trap than a blessing? Trust those feelings. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we need to be most careful around, and sometimes walking away isn't cruelty, it's survival.